Is it your belief that anybody can create a compelling story out of anything, any topic, or does the nature of the topic need to be interesting in and of itself? Like, can you maybe as a journalist or now a founder make a story out of something that maybe people may consider boring or a bland topic?
Well, aside from my founding journey, I also consult other startups and organizations on all sorts of communication related things. So I do have to work with a lot of topics that, well, I wouldn't say don't make sense, but they may be super boring, or they don't have a clear call to action, or well, it's not entirely clear why anyone would care for it. And I have to do that mental exercise all the time, find that edge, find that angle that would make people care. So I think anything can be packaged in a way that people would care. But obviously, the more mastery the person who's doing that has in storytelling and in communication, the better the result would be. Because sometimes, well, not even sometimes, but you probably know that a lot of founders are not great storytellers. And we may buzz as much as we want about founders needing to be great storytellers. We just can't inject years of expertise that someone who's worked in communications has into new founders' head. So it's great if you have a natural talent or you happen to have a topic or a story that you don't really need to repackage too much. But there is nothing wrong with consulting other people, asking for help when you're not sure how to do that. Because, well, we're all trained to do some jobs better than others. I just happen to be gifted and have developed my career in this.
So is that what it takes though, right? You've spent years mastering this art? Is it just time and repetition and understanding how to tell an effective story? Is that what you'd recommend? And then in addition to that, hey, if you don't have 3 years to develop your skills storytelling, consult with somebody like you.
Well, I think there are some universal basics, and I'd say the number one basic foundation for being a great storyteller or developing that skill is having natural interest for people, for humans, for their lives, for what goes on in their minds. And that's where it all starts, really, because when you're creating a solution for someone, well, you should probably care for that someone. You should probably care for their problems, for what their day is like without your solution or with whatever they're using now. Because if you don't, then you're probably not as engaged as what you're doing. Um, Obviously, there are exceptions, but that's how I'd like to see it. So being naturally curious and just never losing that wonder is something that sets you up for a good position as a storyteller. So I'd like to say. Also, obviously, doing some reading in your free time helps. Like basics of psychology, understanding how human minds can work, understanding some of the motives and values and all of that. That's also important because you just can't ignore, well, millions of years of human evolution and the patterns that we developed from it, and whatever has influenced the mentality of different, say, cultures and ethnicities and nationalities over the decades that have passed. So when you're pitching your solution in one market, you may want to sound completely different in another because there is a historical context to it. So obviously, it's now making this whole concept of how to become a storyteller more difficult. But I'm just making an emphasis on the fact that generally being curious and educated is already a great basis for developing the storytelling skills on top.
How much do you think emotion plays into it? If I think about it, when you're storytelling or trying to persuade somebody, you're trying to make them feel a certain way and then act upon that emotion. Is that a fair assessment, or is that what you do maybe when you're trying to pitch your startup, or am I off base?
So in terms of emotions, it's a very interesting topic because my sincere belief is that provoking emotion and pressing the emotion into your audience are two different things. And you really want to strike the balance so that you cause the emotion without making your audience feeling exploited and pressed into it. The the best examples that I can think of, they're from charity. Like if you see different campaigns from, say, cancer charity funds, well, most of these campaigns and materials are distressing because they're pressuring you into feeling sorry, feeling sympathizing with their suffering. And that's why most of the time you end up unsubscribing from those stories and from those posts, or you're just scrolling them down because you don't want to feel the pain, you don't want to feel irritated. So instead, you actually, well, if you're on that side of the organization's fundraising, you want to provoke other emotions. You don't want to provoke your audience to suffer. You don't want to provoke them to feel sorry. You want to provoke something else. And that's a different topic that I like to talk about when I explain what it's like not to overexplode emotions. Point being, rather than telling your audience what they should feel and using the words describing the feelings, use the data, use the right images, use the right tools which would make the audience feel how you'd expect them to feel. That's what the biggest brands are best at. Without necessarily using the words, they use a combination of data or the images or the sequence of images to provoke you to feel something without explicitly telling you what you should feel. Does that make sense?